the balance is challenging as a founder, and it's important to try and find it. And I had a mentor who unfortunately recently passed away, a gentleman by the name of Joel Peterson, who told me once that work-life balance doesn't mean that on any given day you spend 50% of your time working and 50% doing the other things. He said, but when you look over a larger chunk of time, did you give the right energy to the right things?
Welcome to A Founder's Life. I'm your host, Leo Gestetner. On this show, we dive into the real stories behind the highs and lows of entrepreneurship and how we pursue a more integrated and meaningful life along the way. This podcast is sponsored by Thanks, helping founders like us scale with reliable remote talent. Now, I'm excited today to be joined by Graham Topol. Graham, thank you for joining. Would you mind introducing yourself to the audience?
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Leo. My name is Graham Topol, and I am the co-founder and co-CEO of MGT Insurance, which is an applied AI company solving hard problems in commercial property and casualty insurance.
Excellent. Well, talk to us a little bit about your journey that brought you to where you are today, and then a little more about what your business is doing to revolutionize sort of the insurance industry and, helping out small businesses.
Absolutely. So really appreciated the opportunity to tell our story here. We're only partway through the journey, but it's been fascinating to date. And so I'll go back to, coming out of college, I started my career in investment banking in New York. It was all the rage back then. And I did a lot of M&A transactions for financial institutions. And I learned that while balance sheets were out of vogue and have been for quite a while, that there was a lot of fascinating aspects about really understanding deeply how a balance sheet worked and how those kinds of businesses create value in the economy. And you think about banks, insurance companies, things like that. They don't seem very sexy to the average person, particularly not the average founder, but they really captivated me. I really wanted to understand how they worked, what made them successful. And in particular, as I started to progress in my career, how technology could be applied to make them more efficient, because so many of those types of businesses rely on the scale and history that they've achieved without really thinking about innovation. And so from my investment banking time, I actually ended up working for the COO of Morgan Stanley. I was working on some transactions for the bank itself, and I got an opportunity to work in the office of the COO. And amongst my many mandates, one of them was trying to figure out how to use technology to drive efficiency for the bank. And that was kind of a hook for me. I kind of fell in love with that concept. And so I did what any rational person in New York did back then. And I actually went and worked as an investor and trying to find companies that use technology to drive efficiency specifically for financial services or create new business models for financial services, et cetera. And I spent a lot of time looking at a number of verticals. Payments, I think, was particularly interesting, wealth management. But the one that I was really interested in was insurance. And it felt like, this was the 2010s. It just felt like the idea was there, the market was there, but we couldn't find the right business model. And back in the 2010s, you really only had two options if you wanted to do insurance, but you could sell software to insurance companies. That was really hard, and it's gotten a little easier, but it's still really hard. I can talk a little bit about why, but for the sake of time, let's just say that we take my word that it was hard. The other were more distribution plays. This business model called an MGA, tech-enabled brokers. I liked them. I think they were useful, but they weren't what I was looking for. The kind of business I really wanted, something that was durable, that actually attacked the heart of the insurance value chain, which was the licensed entity. And so I left private equity, growth equity, and I went back to business school. I moved west out to Silicon Valley. I went to Stanford. And while I was there, I was working for one of these tech-enabled brokerages. And I got really deep over the course of my 2 years of working at that brokerage on kind of the process and all of the problems with the process that created friction for the end customer. And you think about a single location bakery, somebody who's really passionate about their craft. They've found space that they've leased. They've taken on a loan. This is their moment, and they've got their grand opening up, and the landlord says, "Hey, can I get a copy of your insurance certificate?" And you go, "Shoot, I forgot to get insurance. My lease required it. I forgot to get it." And that's where the problem starts, right? Because you don't become a baker to buy insurance. You do it because you love your craft. And it should be easy to get insurance, but it's not. Typically, you go and talk to a broker. They represent your interests. These are valued advisors in the value chain. I actually think that's part of our core thesis at MGT. But they go out and they talk to a number of carriers. And what I learned at my time at Newfront is oftentimes these carriers would require, faxed documents or printed and mailed documents. I mean, literally physical documents that they would then read, hand off to an underwriter would read, and finally you'd get a quote. But that process would take on average 2 weeks. On the carrier side, it would touch 4 or 5 different people. And there was not a lot of consistency either across underwriters within a company, but certainly across the industry for these small commercial accounts. So you're a baker and you're so excited about opening your storefront, and you realize that you're held up by insurance because you can't get a same day turnaround. It's very confusing. The pricing isn't that high, but you don't really know what to expect. And so that was a light bulb moment for me while I was in business school. And working at this brokerage, that if we really wanted to change insurance, which I'd been looking at for almost a decade at this point, you actually had to do it from the point at which insurance is issued. The underwriter, the core insurance company, the carrier. And so I partnered with my brother, who's my co-founder and co-CEO. He had a different but equally interesting path, which I won't spend too much time on, but he had spent half a decade building one of the early insurtechs in Silicon Valley that had scaled really, really successfully. And so he had the operational experience and I had my investing plus operational experience. And so we teamed up to launch MGT.
You found the path that was needed. And your brother, I think, is your business partner. Is that right?
Yeah.
And you're still talking to each other? That's working well?
Yes, more often than not. I would say we spend more of the day talking to each other than we spend not talking to each other. And we've always been really close. And it's been a really great partnership. And I couldn't be here without him. And hopefully he would say the same about me.
Perfect. I love that. And that sort of leads quite well into talking about family. So, I think as a healthy part of life generally and the entrepreneurial journey is family. So talk to us a little bit about how family looks for you.
It's a great question. So I'm really fortunate personally. I've got obviously my brother who I'm incredibly close with. We talk 20 hours a day or so, whatever waking hours, we spend a lot of them talking to each other. But I'm really blessed to have just an absolutely wonderful life partner in my wife, who I actually met in business school. And then we've just welcomed our first child. We have a 3-month-old daughter. And so family life is really fun right now. We're having a really good time. And as you mentioned, the balance is challenging as a founder, and it's important to try and find it. And I had a mentor who unfortunately recently passed away, a gentleman by the name of Joel Peterson, who told me once that work-life balance doesn't mean that on any given day you spend 50% of your time working and 50% doing the other things. He said, but when you look over a larger chunk of time, did you give the right energy to the right things? And he always talked about the concept of glass and rubber balls and which ones if you're juggling, which ones can be dropped and will bounce and which ones can't. And he always said your children are glass balls. You cannot drop, and obviously he didn't mean physically, but like the parental responsibilities related to children. So it's been really fun. Like I'm barely into this chapter of my life, but already some of the lessons that Joel espoused for years, they've started to click for me.
I'd never heard that description, but I think it's great. Now, I'm a massive believer in that sort of work-life balance, work-life integration, whatever you want to call it. And we'll talk about that a bit more in a minute. But I think no one is permanently in balance. So people are like, I don't have a work-life balance. And no one does. I mean, I'm sure there's some people. But it's overall, yes, sometimes you have to work really long hours. Sometimes you spend with the kids. But overall, it's finding that balance. But we'll talk about that one a little more in a minute. Quick request for the audience. If you're enjoying these conversations, please click subscribe. And then back to, so the next part I think of sort of as an important part of, again, sort of health span, which, you look at family, you want to be around for your kids, etc., is health. Now that comes in many ways. That's sleep, it's mental health, it's physical health, it's nutrition. How does health look for you?
It's a great question. And I don't think founders talk about it enough. I think there's folks in the world who will tell you that you should be working 20 hours a day, 7 days a week. And I've done that in my career in banking and private equity. And there are many times I do that still. But I think the thing that I've come to realize is so important as a founder is you're looked to be the emotional, cultural, intellectual leader of your organization. And if whether you've got 20 employees, 50, 100, 500, you can't be the right kind of leader if you haven't taken care of yourself first. And so, for me, I would say I can operate on a little bit of sleep for a while, and then eventually I need it. And you got to kind of know what you need. But I do know that, like, for example, I need to work out. I need to exercise. I need to be in the gym at least 4 days a week. And I've got to, if I don't do that, I know I'm not my best self and I can't be the right leader for my organization. I find those sessions not only to be just important for grounding me so that I can go in and have conversations with my team in which, I've got mental clarity and I'm calm and I can listen. I actually find that also many of my biggest breakthroughs happen while I'm in the gym, things that I've been, I haven't quite had time to really think about because there's all this noise. And then I get to the gym with headphones in, the noise quiets, and I've got the answer. I've got the clarity of thought. So I think that for me, one of those really important pieces of being a good leader is making sure that I've actually gotten to the gym, because it solves for me, a lot of the mental and physical health pieces. And, the sleep is obviously critical. I know at my age, the way I work, I can operate on a little bit of sleep for a couple weeks straight before I really need it. But the exercise is non-negotiable.
Yeah, I think healthy body, healthy mind. And yeah, sleep is one of those things. I always find it funny. You get these entrepreneurs, who say, I manage on 3 hours sleep a night. I'm sure there's people who can, they're freaks, but that's not normal, as in, unless that happens to be unique biology. Most humans need sleep. Now, yes, you're right. You can manage for a while where you're doing a big deal. We can all manage and adrenaline will keep you going. But at some point it'll catch up. But the body recovers during sleep, like whether it be recovers from, mental, whatever you're doing, or whether it be recovers from, you gone to the gym. When you're asleep, that's when your body is recovering.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think.
Well, I also think there's this mantra currently in Silicon Valley, which this isn't to say our people don't work incredibly hard. There's 996. I would say that actually there's a lot of folks at MGT who work a lot longer than those hours, but we don't run a prison. And we think about outcomes a lot more than measuring hours. I think if you're measuring hours and you're not measuring outcomes, you're probably pointed at the wrong problem. It's not to say that hours aren't an input. They are, but they're not the goal. The outcomes are the goal. And so we're really focused on that. And so, if somebody needs 8 hours of sleep, then they should get that to be their best selves. And if somebody else only needs 5, then they should get that. And we try not to lock people in a room and police them. We try to let them be adults and say, we've hired you because you're talented. We've hired you because you're intelligent. We've hired you because we trust you. And so we've I think it's become a little rampant in Silicon Valley to talk about how you enforce hours at your company. I just don't think that's super productive. Maybe it is for some people. Everybody has their own way of working, but it's not necessarily how we've built our company, because if you hire good people, they should know how to manage themselves to be their best selves.
Makes complete sense. And what do you like to do for fun?
Right now, spending as much time with my 3-month-old is probably my hobby. I don't know. Is that a hobby? I don't know how to describe it. We also have a very cute puppy who I love to take for walks, and he's really trainable. So I'm teaching him new tricks. The other day, I taught him how to pick up the newspaper in his mouth and deliver it to folks. I don't think he understood what he was doing, but he thought it was a toy that he would bring to people, and that was fun. But, outside of the family things, which are pretty consuming given the age of my daughter, I also spend a lot of time reading. I love to read. I like to read fiction. I love sci-fi. I used to read more fantasy. I do read a bunch of historical books as well. And then I'm a big sports fanatic. I've played a lot of sports in my lifetime, some more competitively than others, but I still play soccer if I can once a week. There's a game in San Francisco that I'm pickup game on Thursday mornings that I play in, and I find that to be one of the highlights of my week. At one point, I was a reasonably good golfer, so if I can get out on the course, it's not happening so much now with the commitments, but hopefully I'll get back to that at some point. So, and then this is the summer of the World Cup, so not only do I like to play sports, but if there's something like that on TV, I'll watch it pretty religiously.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm not a big one for watching a lot of sport on TV. It's not something I do a ton of. The World Cup, I definitely was, especially if England were involved or Portugal, because I'm in Portugal right now. In Portugal, actually, there's parties on the streets where they set up these massive TVs, thousands, tens of thousands of people watching these big TVs. They're definitely taking it seriously. So we started talking a little earlier. What does an integrated life look like for you across those 4 areas?
It's a great question. I think one of the core tenets that I hold dear is I'm not one of those people. I don't think it's possible these days to leave work completely at work. I just don't think it works that way. And so my wife is my biggest confidant. She's brilliant. And so sometimes I talk about work with her and she helps me work through things. And it's actually a nice way to connect. It's not the only thing we talk about by any means. We talk about lots of things, our daughter, what we want out of life, getting to the gym this week or not, things like that. But, I think actually being able to talk about it at home helps a lot because it brings us closer together, it connects us, it helps us maintain that balance. And then, she's obviously so important to me above everything else. And so, when I do need to go, she'll recognize it before I do. She'll be like, hey, I think you should go for a run, or I think you should do these things. So she helps keep me in balance, because I think I probably would have a tendency, like most founders, to get a little obsessive about what we do. And so I think those are the moments, though, where being pulled out and sort of being checked and saying, I think you should go for a run. I think it'll help clear your head. I think, it'll be a nice way. We like to cook together, actually, something we do. I think that's a really fun activity that kind of gets me out of founder mode and into just, a normal, balanced sort of mindset. And I think these are good questions because they're forcing me to be somewhat self-reflective. And I think the commonality is just having a couple activities and moments where you sort of can take off the founder hat and put on, whether it's dad or husband or friend or exercise. I think those are just really critical because, it's a marathon. A founder's life, it doesn't end, I think. I've talked to some folks, even if you have a different company or you've sold, you kind of always have that mindset and it kind of persists throughout your whole life. And so being forced a little bit to take off that hat just for a moment and think about other things, I think is really grounding and helps you maintain a pace through the marathon that is probably above a lot faster than if you just sprint it all the time. I think you burn out pretty fast.
I'd agree 100%. I think what you said is right. And I can say that both as a marathoner and someone who's had 12 plus companies over the years. It's fun. It's not an easy job. I mean, there's nothing easy about being an entrepreneur, but there's also nothing more satisfying, maybe being a parent. Your business is your baby. You're watching it grow. Yeah, the ups and the downs. Now, what's been a pivotal moment in your life?
There have been a couple. I mean, there's been many pivotal moments in my life. From a work founder's perspective, my brother and I spent a number of years. Launching an insurance company is quite difficult if you want to do it the right way. There's a number of regulatory hurdles that you have to clear. And early on, we thought that the only way to do that was to actually buy a legacy insurance company. We ended up launching one from scratch a little later, but we had a deal to buy a large legacy insurance company. And we had spent a couple years trying to get this done. We had raised a bunch of capital in the wings. We had actually taken on a significant amount of personal debt. We had had no salaries for almost 5 years at this point. And it became apparent that this asset wasn't the right asset for us through a number of developments that weren't clear before, and they sort of happened in tandem. And we made the very difficult decision to pull out of that process, despite having, talk about sunk cost fallacy. We had spent so much time, telling people that this would work and taking on, frankly, personal debt, like millions of dollars personal debt. So it's a very painful decision to pull out. But I think when you talk about pivotal decisions, having the courage to do that really freed us, because once you've made that kind of hard decision once, you can make hard decisions that over and over. And I think it kind of expanded my mind. It kind of changed the way I view the world. A lot of people make decisions binary. It is or it isn't. Like, if I don't do this, it'll never happen. And actually, I don't think that way anymore. And we made this really hard decision. It was really painful. And it led to somewhere so much better. So much better.
It sounds like you found the perfect route. One piece of advice you would give to an aspiring entrepreneur?
Yeah, it's hard. I don't think anybody's ever said it was easy. Entrepreneurship shouldn't be a means to an end in terms of getting wealthy or fame. It really is a labor of love. You have to really want to create to be an entrepreneur. And I think the folks like yourself who have done it a number of times probably would corroborate that. Is you're not going to be right all the time, but you've got to really believe in what you're doing. So you better love what you're getting yourself into, because it's not easy. And it's also really rewarding. So I would say, the commitment and the reason why, you have to be passionate about what you do, because it's not a means of getting wealthy quickly. That would be the first. And then the second is patience. I'm not a particularly patient person. I think anybody who knows me well would tell you that, and I would own it. But good things take a ton of effort, a lot of luck, and then a little bit of time. And so I think if I could go back and tell myself as a budding entrepreneur, I would probably tell myself that it will work out. You have to trust yourself, and you've got to put in the work every day and then be patient, because, the old Wayne Gretzky quote of you got to miss 100% of the shots you don't take. You got to just keep taking shots. Eventually they go in, but it may happen on your first one, but it may not. And that's okay.
Yeah. Or the one I like to say is the fastest answer to a no is don't ask the question. So how can people find you?
In terms of a company, mgtinsurance.com is where you can find us. We're on LinkedIn. But if you're looking for a small commercial insurance policy, we work through our partners who are brokers, insurance brokers and agents all across America. If you've got a small business, we talk about entrepreneurship. This is my last plug. We talk about entrepreneurship in Silicon Valley as all of us, AI companies. And sure, there's certainly a piece of that. But the real entrepreneurs in this country, there are 35 million small business owners. And like I said, this is the baker. This is the person who inherits the grocery store from their grandparent in Nebraska and wants to expand. This is the person who has come over from another country and they've put their entire life savings into starting a business in America. And that's the American dream. And so if you're an entrepreneur, you're one of those 35 million small business owners who makes America's local economies run, who creates jobs, ask your insurance broker about MGT. See if we're a good fit for you, because we want to support you. We want to support your ambitions and your dreams. And then when, things go wrong, that's why insurance exists. We want to be there to help you rebuild your business, to help rebuild your community, to help protect jobs. And that's our mission. Our mission is to support the 35 million small businesses in America and the entrepreneurs who run them.
It's a great mission. Well, thank you, Graham. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Leo. I really appreciate the time.
And thank you for listening to today's episode. If you enjoyed the conversation, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and please tell your friends.